The point here is that this means that you, as a developer, have to deal with replication. So you have to think about whether I want to trade consistency for availability, and you need to bake that into your software. And you do that by using write concerns, for example. So in the write concern, you would express whether you would want to just have the data, well, be unacknowledged at all, so you don't really care whether it even goes to the database server, or at the other end of the spectrum, you make sure that the data actually goes to some or all of the nodes in the replica set, so that all replicas see the same data. And again, for the queries, the same thing. So you can choose to either go only for the master, then you will see the data as it has been stored in the database always, or you also go to the slaves. Then there is a small time gap between the master and the slaves, and you might get some inconsistent results because you're reading from the slave and the slave doesn't necessarily see all the changes from the master. And that is something that is in the code, so it's your responsibility as an architect to deal with that. So instead of having all the complexity in the setup in the ops space, it's actually something that you as an architect or as a software developer have to deal with. So what does that mean? It means that the architect role grows in responsibility and also in power, while the more traditional database administrator has less influence on the system. As I said, this is basically, well, to some extent a good thing because there is more flexibility, you can have more choices, but at the same time it means that you have to deal with things that otherwise are just things that are dealt with by operations people that are also experienced with that, and you now as a developer architect have to deal with them as well and think about them. Which might be a good thing anyway, because at the end of the day it's about running software, software that runs in production, and you need to do that, you need to have that in mind all the time. So, to sum up, in my opinion, architecture has always been a multi-dimensional problem. So there is maintainability, there is software quality, there is security, and there is, as I said, the operations part. And the new thing to me that NoSQL brings to the table is that you can actually choose a persistence technology. So you are not tied to just using a relational database. There are different databases that you can use for different specific purposes, as I said. However, you need to think about operations, because first of all, more of the things that were usually done in operations that might be added as an afterthought, like in Index, for example, are now baked directly in the code. Cluster management is moved from being infrastructure and the setup in infrastructure that is transparent to a developer to something that, again, influences the code. So you need to think about that. And probably you need to, well, think about the work that otherwise the database administrator would do. So, yeah, in my opinion, NoSQL is all about this persistence question, and you can actually, I think that the nice thing is that you can actually give different answers to this question, different technology decisions, and use the tool that is right for the specific job. So, are there, yeah, this concludes my presentation. Are there any questions that I might answer? I'll try to answer.
You draw these very clear distinctions between architects and DBAs, and presumably developers as well. I'm curious if you can expand on that, if you feel that distinction is somehow always true, or anyway, on this subject.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the lines are blurring in my opinion. So as you've seen, I'm not actually sure whether it's an architect or a developer. And if you think in particular about the DevOps thing and the DevOps movement and teams that actually deliver and run software, then it sort of makes less sense, obviously. The reason why I'm talking about that and why I have that in the presentation is because I come from an enterprise background, and the reality out there is that enterprises do have operations departments, and they do have database administrators, and it turns out that discussions with those people are actually quite interesting, because they are surprised by how NoSQL databases just also change the way that they are running their systems, because all of a sudden they realize that the investments that they made in storage technologies, for example, might not be the best fit for NoSQL, and that they might save money there. So that's basically, yeah. As I said, I mean, if you're working in a startup and in a DevOps environment, the lines are obviously blurred, but it's more like from an enterprise perspective. Oh, and by the way, the other thing is, I mean, it's also, I mean, people who know how to run some kind of software might not be the ones that you can talk to about some specific Java code that you have. So if you have right concerns in there, I'm not sure whether you could talk to them about it. I don't know. It's just that it's in a different part of the system. It's not in a configuration file anymore. It's somewhere hidden in the code. There was a question on the back.
Yeah. What is the biggest disadvantage of MongoDB?
What is the biggest disadvantage of MongoDB?
In your opinion?
That's a mean question.
Yeah.
As I said, I mean, it might not be the best solution for graph problems, as I said. The other thing is, so as I said earlier, we sort of ran it heads-on against Elasticsearch. We had Elasticsearch and MongoDB in the same project. I found the way in which Elasticsearch handled scale-out much more elegant. Meaning that if you scale out Elasticsearch, all you really do is to bring up a new server and tell it some way to actually find the rest of the cluster, and that's it. While in MongoDB, you actually need to do some configuration work there. And I'm just curious whether the Tension guys and MongoDB guys will change that in the future. I mean, it has a good reason why it is done that way, because you probably don't want to rely on automatic things in all cases, but I personally found that to be a difference, and it just adds to the complexity on the operations side. Otherwise, I don't really see any much issues with it. Any other opinions?
Okay. Maybe a follow-up question. Some people, especially recently, have criticized MongoDB for their consistency guarantees being somehow, well, as strongly as broken by design, in that they confirm a write is written well before it's actually written. What's your opinion on this? Have you heard these stories?
Yeah, I've read it, and there were some discussions. There were some responses by the Tension guys. I don't see. My impression from the write concerns and the way that they are implemented and the way they were is actually quite good. So to me, it seems that you actually have pretty fine-grained and good control over how data is written in the cluster, even in several data centers. So I didn't really see that point, to be honest. But I didn't follow up in the last detailed bit.
Full text search, this feature, how good it is in MongoDB? Do you have experience?
No, I don't, and the reason is because it's officially in beta, as I said, so it's not officially released. And so that means we have played around with it, and it's it's okay, but it is not something that I would use in production right now, or that I would recommend to the customers, because I don't believe that you should put software in production that is officially labeled as better. And I mean, the other reason, as I said, in this specific case, the demands were very high, and for that reason, it was out of the question that we actually needed like a proper full text search engine. It's not like you would just say, okay, do some basic full text search. It was pretty advanced and pretty demanding custom in that regard. So that's why we didn't really follow up that part. Okay, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.